Beth, I just wanted to let you know that we have a land use clerk Zoom account now. Um,
Oh, nice.
won't make any difference on your end. Hopefully, I mean, the three boards will just continue to use the link that's up, up on my town government on the calendar, but it should
Hmm.
be easier on my end.
Yeah, definitely. So how many accounts does the town have now total?
I don't know. I know that I was told to use the land use clerk one for the CPC as well, for the time being. So it sounds like maybe not a lot, but yeah,
Hmm.
hopefully this will solve some of the traffic jam issues.
Yeah, definitely. That's good. And then you're sort of just must feel you're kind of guaranteed to have one, which is good for you yourself, You feel not worried that you're not going to have one for a meeting. Yeah. So how's it going as land use clerk?
Going well. I was
Good.
making some progress on the backlog of minutes, um, but there's not a ton left. The ZBA was pretty quick to do because they didn't have a lot, but
Hmm.
planning board and Concom, there's a whole bunch to catch up on.
Oh yeah, I bet.
That, it turned out actually that a lot of the ZBA ones were done and approved, but hadn't been sent to Grace, so that list got short fast.
Oh, that's easy. Yeah. I don't think that's true for the Concom.
Yep.
I don't think so. Yeah. It's all been a little crazy lately, but um did you hear we that Mayor Fox got appointed?
Yep. Actually, she came into town hall today, so I had a chance to chat and get.
Good. Yeah, she left me a message. She said she got sworn in, but she's gonna be a little late to the meeting tonight, like more like 6:15 or something. But yeah.
I'm going to turn off my camera so I'm not present.
Oh, you're gonna hide, are you?
I'm behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. That's good.
Hey Beth,
Scott, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Although when we scheduled this, the Sugar Bowl was not taking place.
Yeah, yep. Do you have a one of those, gambling things where you're betting on all the different football games?
I'm just participating for sport.
Yes. Well, yes.
I am
Yeah.
here at Notre Dame headquarters.
Oh, yeah. Hmm. I picked Notre Dame too. I am in one of those things, but it's just for fun. No money involved.
Yeah.
So
Well,
are
if we
you home?
if we blaze through this faster, I won't be at all disappointed.
You won't be? Okay. All right. Well, we'll try and do that. Hi, Jan. All right. Well, then let's get started. Bob is coming at some point. Mayor got sworn in today. So Scott, I don't know, but Mayor got appointed by the select board, Mayor Fox. got
Oh,
appointed
good.
to the Conservation Commission on Monday night.
Great.
And she got sworn in today, and she is gonna be a little late to the meeting, though. She said 6:15, but all right, I think are gonna call this meeting to order. It is 6:01 on January 2nd, 2025, and I'm calling this meeting of the Shutesbury Conservation Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded. Oh, Mateo?
Could I just ask Joseph's iPad, what is your last name? I'm assuming it's not iPad.
It's Salvador.
Thank you.
All right, well, this meeting is just really a special meeting to just work on the regulations, and I think we're gonna try and limit it to just the 2 hours, 6 to 8 PM. I hope Bob shows up pretty soon, just so he can participate. But we do have a couple other things on the agenda. First, I think item number 1 is to review and approve the minutes from December 12th. Do I have a motion, or anybody have any comments or anything on the minutes?
I have a couple comments.
Okay,
Under site visits on December 12th, the sign looks good, not, we need a sign. That was the Salvador project. They have their sign in place. So that's one thing. And then under the bylaws and regulations, the 10th paragraph, it said docks are to be set 20 feet apart from property lines, but it was really 25. That's all I caught.
great. Thank you for catching those things. Any other comments on the minutes from December 12th? Nope. Okay, so motion to approve the minutes of December 12th, 2024 with edits as noted by Jan tonight.
So motioned?
Second.
Second.
All right, Con,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
and Wilson. Aye. Okay, great. The other thing on the agenda is some mowing that's been requested by the people who own Baker Fields. It's where we hold, well, Kestrel holds a CR on the land. It's the farm that's at the intersection of Baker Road and Pelham Hill Road. So that came along with the annual report from Kestrel, from Stu Watson. He just, he sent sort of an annual report of the monitoring that he's done of the CRs that they oversee. So I sent that all to you guys, and sort of attached to it, he just kind of threw out this question that they were wondering about mowing that area. And then he had a map that showed where it was, which I can bring up if people want to see it. And so I guess my question to the commission really is, to me, that area is not agriculturally exempt. It's really it's a stream that flows through the center of that field area. We did a site visit. Jan, I don't think you were there. It was me and Scott and Bob did a really long site visit out there a while ago to look at all the different areas that are being farmed, that they are just looking at doing some farming. So that's a stream. And the letter just mentions that Jeff Lacey, who used to own it, used to mow that area once a year. And that's just info that came from Stu. So I'm wondering, I think they need to actually come forward with an actual application to ask for that kind of thing instead of just a request through Stu's letter. And I just wanted to check with you guys because there was this reference to it being historically mowed once a year. And so I wanted to see how people felt about it. But so what are your thoughts on it?
Well, just to be clear to this, there's also a conservation restriction on this area, but I don't think it covers mowing. I don't think the mowing is prohibited. I think it's other items. When I look through the CR, so I think your point, Beth, is it's more about the wetland regs and our authorities under that than it is under the CR. I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think in that letter Stu said that he was fine with the mowing, like in terms of what the CR is looking at. They were okay with it, but it really falls under the wetlands regulations because it's not an area that's agriculturally exempt.
And I think we have allowed other mowing in similar circumstances. I'm thinking about, we've of course talked about it before, the libraries, Law 32. We have the other mowing that Kestrel does on the Brightwater Bog
Mhm.
piece. I think we've conditioned frozen soil conditions for the mowing to take place. I don't know if that's what they're looking for or not, but I know we've done that. And I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking if we tell them this isn't agriculturally exempt, if you want to do it, you need to, you need to do an application to the commission because that gives us the opportunity to condition it like that. Tell them if we want them to do it when the ground's frozen, tell them, exactly how we'd like it mowed, that kind of thing. So that's what I was thinking. And I'm happy to reach out to, I think her name's Maria, and let her know that. If that's what people think.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, great. All right, good. Don't need to vote on that. That was just discussion. And we will reach out to her and get an application. All right. I'm wondering if I should text Bob and just see why he's not here. He said he could come, didn't he? I'm just gonna text him quickly. Okay. Before we dig into the regs, I do also want to remind people we have a site visit tomorrow at the Sirius community at 3:45. I know, I think Jan said she could be there. Scott, I don't know if,
No, I'm at Notre Dame headquarters, out of town.
wow, okay, good.
Not bad.
Not bad, no. You're there right now?
I am.
Oh, that's why I was gonna ask you if you were home or not. I couldn't tell. Oh, okay. All right, then my other question would just be, and this is kind of Jan and Mateo, is that we need to do a site visit to 58 Lake Drive before we have our meeting next week. And I'm wondering if either one of you have already reached out to those folks about a site visit or who wants to set up a site visit with them.
I have not. Who are we talking about?
58 Lake Drive. I don't have the name written down, but it's an NOI, and they're on our agenda for next Thursday.
Oh, the Burnses.
Yes, you are
Yes,
correct.
I can reach out to them.
Okay. That would be great.
I have to recuse for that one. But I can
Okay.
schedule them.
Yes. Yes, you can.
And so you want to do that sometime before the meeting? You have
Yeah,
a particular date, Thursday, usual 3:45 kind of a deal?
that would be great. Did we already schedule anything for that? Let's see, the 9th. Nope, I have no other site visit. So yeah, that would be great if we could do it on the 9th at 3:45.
They are not year rounders.
Okay.
They're seasonal. So I'll try to make it that day.
I mean, and if they want to do it earlier in the week, just,
On
that's
the
fine
weekend?
too.
Any chance on the weekend?
Yeah, I'm not doing much this weekend.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
try to see what they can do.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can't hold the hearing until we've had a site visit, so um,
Okay.
just let them know. All right, great. That's everything I had on my notes. So we can dig into the regs. If I can share my screen.
Donna has her hand up.
Oh, hi, Donna.
Hi, good evening. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah,
I was tasked with looking into what would happen if the Concom cannot get a quorum at that meeting and to report back to this one. I can do it tonight or I can do it at some other meeting. It would be pretty quick if you want me to do it tonight.
can't get quorum for what meeting?
Can't get quorum for a meeting or a
Oh,
hearing. I was just
yeah.
asked a generic question at that meeting.
Yeah, sure. You can, if you want to report on it right now, that's great.
Yeah, I would first point out to everybody, Miriam sent an excellent email around this afternoon with excerpts from several articles on Concoms and quorums and the debate around it. So if anybody has time to read those articles, they're very good and they really outline exactly what it is. For all intents and purposes, a quorum for the Concom is a majority of the number of positions, not the number of people sitting on the Concom at any particular time. There's a little dispute about that. The Concom Association has argued that it's the number of positions, but I think particularly if it's an important or controversial hearing or decision you're making, I would strongly recommend that you have a majority of the position of the number of seats on a Concom, not just how many people are holding them. The other piece of it is there really is nothing like in zoning that says that there's a constructive grant if you don't hold the hearing. So in actuality, I think the real process is if you can't get a quorum and somebody's in for a hearing and they won't continue it, then their only real recourse is to go to DEP to get the NOI or whatever you weren't able to do a hearing on. So that's the basic rules of thumb. There's some exceptions. And of course, as in most things, lawyers can always try and find arguments around those kind of things, but those are the basic rules. And that's really what I would operate on, particularly if it's an important hearing, controversial issue, or anything of that sort.
Great, thank you. That's good to know. That's what I always had, knew and followed in Amherst and everything, but I cannot tell you how many times people have told me that, oh, it's in the Wetlands Protection Act that you can actually do it by the number of people, seated. If you don't have if we say we didn't have all 5 people and we only had 4 people, that that it's not based on that 5. But I've always said, no, it's based on how many seats is a full commission.
Yeah, I don't believe it's in the Wetland Protection Act, but I do believe towns have passed bylaws and says it's by, number of people that hold positions rather than the number of seats,
Yeah.
regulations of that nature. But given that we don't have either of those in Shutesbury, I would strongly recommend you just go by the number, how many positions there are on the Concom, and then the majority of that.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that. I guess I didn't mention tonight's meeting to you because I thought maybe you didn't necessarily need to come to tonight's meeting. Once we do have the final version of these regs, it will come to you for your review.
I would be more than happy to sign off.
just didn't want you to waste your time. Like we're going through the draft and but we will eventually have something that can come to you. So
Yeah, if you don't need me tonight, there's no reason for me to be here.
okay. Okay. Well, thank you for coming to tell us about the quorum issue. I think that's great.
All right, I think Miriam might have
Oh,
some
Miriam has her hand
before
up.
I sign off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, my sound wasn't working earlier. Thanks, Donna, for that clarification. What question I have is, it appears that there's at least one property down by the lake that is within 300 feet of all three commissioners, and there's an open permit currently, that's 70 Lake Drive. I don't believe they have a certificate of compliance yet. So how would the commission issue a certificate of compliance without three commissioners being able to sign it?
I don't think they can. I think that they may have to get their certificate of compliance from the DEP if it comes to that.
So just, and then for the future for that property, it would mean that the Conservation Commission would be able to issue permits.
Yeah, depending on, yes, depending on whether they change the regulations, if there's a bylaw, if somebody moves from where they live right now into someplace else in Shutesbury. I mean, there's a lot of variables, but you know, I think that it would be an issue.
Thanks.
Well, so, Donna, before you go, I think I included you on an email that I sent that I had talked to the State Ethics Commission about that part of the conflict of interest law referring to property ownership and nearby properties, and that they don't interpret it as every house within 300 feet, somebody
No,
has some
that's
kind of,
absolutely correct. I didn't, when I assumed they were just regular abutters. It's abutters within 300 feet of abutters. So if you're a butter, but or if you're like two abutters away and it's 300 feet, you don't count, that kind of thing. So it's abutters property within 300 feet of abutters.
right, well, the way that they described it to me was that that language is really about abutters to an abutter. So if
That's
you're an
right.
abutter to an abutter, you have a financial conflict of interest under the State Ethics Commission. However, what that 300 feet means is even if you are an abutter to an abutter, but your property line is more than 300 feet from the property line that the project is happening on, you don't have a conflict of interest. So it really has nothing to do with who's within 300 feet. It has everything to do with who's an abutter to an abutter. And so that kind of changes this whole idea of looking at it as 300 feet from where people live.
Well, and I think the other piece of it is this, that the conflict of interest can be overcome. If you get an appraisal, an appraiser to give you a letter that says there will not be an increase or decrease in the value of your property based on that project, would be most of the projects at the lake, I would venture to say, then in fact, you don't have a conflict and you can act. So in other words, for the certificate of compliance, if at least one of the people that has a conflict got a letter from an appraiser saying their property would not increase or decrease if they voted on a certificate of compliance for that project, which is more likely than not, let's face it, then in fact they could vote on it and they wouldn't even have to go to DEP. And for every other permit that they applied for, that would be the same situation.
Right, well, I don't think, like, Jan, are you an abutter to 70 Lake Drive?
So if I go directly across the street,
Yeah,
that's one, right? And I
Yeah,
go to the next one, that's one. If you take me diagonally, I'm still three away. So
well, and
there's no problem there. And additionally, if you, I hear what Donna is saying, and I think it would be fairly easy to demonstrate that, say, mayor's property isn't going to gain value because in my personal observation of value on the lake, it doesn't, it barely crosses the street and it doesn't get back into the rear part of the neighborhood at all. So between all of these interpretations, I don't think there's an issue at all here.
And
I think we'll be
it
fine.
might, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Janice. I think that it might make sense for Matteo to get in touch with like someone like Kim Levitch and sort of have him on speed dial so that if something like that comes up, I think King would probably give you a very good rate for doing those letters. It's certainly not anything that would have to be bid because of the cost. So, you know, I think that if it's necessary and there's planning, I think it can be dealt with fairly effectively.
Mhm. Okay,
That's good to know, but I don't think we'll have an issue.
Okay.
thank you, Donna.
Happy New
Very
Year,
helpful.
all. Goodbye.
Bye. All right. Regulations. I'm going to share my screen. Oh. Hey, Mateo, can you allow me to share my screen?
You should be able to now.
All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Hi, Bob.
Hi there.
All right. So this is our our newest version of the regulations. So what I did was I took the most recent version that Miriam had given to us in November, put it into, you know, Google Docs, and then I shared it with all you guys and made you commenters. So you can comment on it. I'm the only one that can actually make edits to it, but you can, as like right over here is a comment from Scott. So you can go in. So I'm wondering, Bob and Jan, did you guys try to go into the document at all?
I'm
Just
a
making
Google
sure.
idiot, so
Oh.
no.
Do you have Gmail?
I do, and I guess I could figure that out, but I didn't. I don't know what okay, I didn't.
If you're in Gmail and you go to the right, there's this thing with all the little dots. If you click on, you can get to your drive, your Google Drive.
Yeah,
But once you get to your Google Drive, it should be in there, and you can open it.
okay. I didn't do that this time.
Okay. All right. And Bob, I see you're driving.
Yeah, I do have my 12-year-old home this week, so I bet she can teach me how to do it. So stand by. You'll see my comments.
Okay. Great. All right. So anyway, what I took this document, I have gone through most of our previous comments. I haven't quite caught all the way up with to where we were with comments, but I will get to that point. It's getting there. And so we were going to talk about vernal pools was the first section tonight to talk about. So here we have it. How am I going to make this smaller? If it'll let me.
Thanks, Beth, for pulling that all together and putting this on the shared drive. I do think it's going to be way easier for us all to be able to see and comment on the same version of the document. So thanks for doing all that.
Yeah, sure. Is that too small for people? Maybe I should make it. If I go to 90%, we can't see the comments as well. At least I can't.
On my, if I hit control and kind of scroll with my mouse, I can zoom it in on my side and you don't have to do anything. I think
All right.
that really works.
All right, so vernal pools, Scott's comment is just about preambles. You know, wondering if we're going to have the preambles in each section. And I think we talked a little bit about this last time that like I do feel like the preambles are very typical, at least just mimicking the state regs. You know, like the bank section has a preamble. Freshwater wetlands will have a preamble. Buffer zone will have a preamble. So I do like to have them in each of the sections. But that's me. What do you guys think?
I was good keeping it that way. I just knew I remember we had talked about it. I couldn't remember where we had settled, but that was my recollection too. I just thought I'd flag it and make sure I understood.
Yeah, I think in one of the earlier versions that Miriam provided us, sort of the general preambles in the beginning, I thought were a little too much, considering I knew they were going to all be in the back like this with each section. But at this point, Miriam's on the call. She kind of cleaned up the front a bit. So I don't have an issue really with the front anymore either. And I do like them with each of the sections in the back here.
Beth, could I make a comment?
Sure.
Miriam. So just want to remind the commission what the purpose of a preamble is. So it's general statements about the significance of the resource area and environmental science facts about them. And so they kind of lay the basis for establishing standards, because it's explaining what the functions are of the resource areas, as well as providing findings that the commission might choose to include in an order of conditions. If there's some finding in this preamble that you decide is really important, in order to emphasize the basis for why you're requiring what you're requiring for conditions, it's like the preamble kind of is the foundational statements upon which conditions and standards would be built. So that's kind of the logic behind these. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yep.
I have a couple of comments. So in the first section in 313, I guess it is now.
313.
And then 315. And then if you get down into the next one, 321, 3 times we're saying that vernal pools need not be state certified to be protected by the bylaw or the regulations. This is just repetition. I don't know where we want to say that, but if we're going to do that, I don't think we need to keep repeating it. Just a way to clean some.
Let's see. Protocols
Okay.
are-
It's the last line in, well, it's the last line in 312. Then it's in the last line in 315 again. And then it's repeated again in 321, the last line. Kind of pick a spot maybe.
Right, I'm just protecting protocols are essential for
There is the last line.
need not be state certified. Yep. 313, 315, did you say?
Yes. I think so. Should be the last line. Might be the one. No. Let's see. It's in, yeah, it's right there where the cursor is, 316 now.
316.
I thought I was using the November one, but maybe I'm one off again.
The protection of are essential.
Last line.
Yeah, we don't need it in
You can,
both
yeah,
places.
just get rid of it somewhere.
No. Essential for this will depend on these unique and threatened resource areas. Yeah, no, we can definitely get rid of that. I'm wondering if the beginning of 316 is also, sort of discussed in other places. Protection of vernal pools are essential for the survival of wildlife species that depend on these unique and threatened resource areas. Of many vernal pool species.
I would say 315, Beth is saying something a little different because it's speaking to habitat connectivity, where vernal pools to be connected to the larger habitat.
Yeah.
But I agree that possibly 316 could be collapsed into something else.
Yeah. So we're definitely gonna get rid of at least that part, but we can look and find out where we can add this language to a different bullet.
And then I have a question about what is 3.1, if you go back up, 3.1, maybe it's 3.15. I think I'm one off on your stuff. 3.15.
And that's about the connectivity Miriam was saying.
Yeah, this is the connectivity thing. So if you
Yeah.
have a vernal pool next to a vernal pool, kind of a deal, is the connectivity defined anywhere? I didn't see it. So I understand we got 100-foot sort of protected zone around a vernal pool. So if another vernal pool is within that 100-foot, does that define connectivity, or can it be further away?
Can I explain this? I think,
Yeah.
Jan, you're not quite understanding what that is referring to. Is that okay, Beth?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
So, vernal pool species do essential breeding activities within the vernal pool, but then during the life cycle, like for example, salamanders, they range outside of the vernal pool, sometimes as far as 500 feet for their life cycle. It's not that they're moving from one vernal pool to another vernal pool. It's that after they hatch, they move out of the vernal pool during the rest of the year, and then they depend on other kinds of native vegetated habitat. And research has shown that if you have a development project that completely surrounds the vernal pool, even if you give it a 100-foot buffer, the vernal pool species will die out because they need a wider range of native vegetation to move around. And they've even done research that shows that the vernal species won't go into lawns. They'll go around lawns. And so even having connective corridors connecting a vernal pool to some other forested area allows those species through their life cycle to move. So I think habitat connectivity is a pretty common concept in ecology. I don't think there's anything unique about how it's being used here. It's connectivity to other areas. I mean, you could say vernal pool habitat connectivity to the larger landscape.
I understand the term connectivity. My question is, where does it start and stop? We have to have some kind of a measure. And I'm not getting that here. I understand there's some upland values and this and that, but
So it's species specific in terms of what the range is. What's protected is down below in the performance standards and in the regs and in the bylaw. So that's where it starts and stops. You've got the boundaries of the vernal pool, and then you've got, the aura of the vernal pool that's protected. Beyond the 100-foot vernal pool, it's not protected. Beyond the 100-foot boundary of the vernal pool, it's not protected. So that's where it starts and stops. And so there's a delineation method for figuring out that line of where the line of boundary of the vernal pool is. And that's defined elsewhere in the bylaw. Actually, there's a definition for how you delineate it. So that's where this is coming from.
so we are actually sticking with the 100-foot aura around a vernal pool.
It has a 100-foot aura in the bylaw. The bylaw gives it a 100-foot aura. That's not something that the regulations are giving it. It already exists in the new bylaw. Specifically, it's one of the resource areas, I think in Article 2, and all of those have 100-foot auras. And yeah.
So I think this 315 is basically saying that if there's multiple vernal pools, we need to protect, each one individually with their own 100-foot in the event that upland area kind of interconnects and gives the species places to go, because as Miriam said, they go into uplands off season. That's where they go into woods And yeah, it can be up to even 1,000 feet away from a vernal pool, a species can go. So I think that's basically what this is kind of saying is if there's more than one pool, we're protecting each one individually with its 100 foot because they interconnect. Makes
Okay.
sense.
And I
Um,
believe, I don't know if it's in the bylaw or if it's in the regs, but there was language that said that if a vernal pool's aura extends into a previously landscaped area, like someone's yard or their driveway or whatever, that would not be protected.
Right.
So it's exempting, you know, if you have, like I do, the unlucky or lucky, depending on how you think about it, having a vernal pool on your property, you know, the aura doesn't extend into previously landscaped areas.
okay,
Also, in terms of septic systems, you can't build a septic system in a vernal pool. Anyway, you can't do that.
okay, thank you. Jan, was there a third place where we say the vernal pools don't need to be certified to be protected by the bylaw? Did you say there was another one? Oh, is it right here?
The last one was in, oops, the last
Page
one was in definitions, the first item of definitions,
Here's
which
a,
maybe you want to leave it there. It's the very last line of 321.
right, yeah, provides essential reading and
It would
yeah,
make sense
it's a
to leave
little
it
bit
there.
different. Yeah, it kind of refers to it a little bit differently. Okay, going down. I didn't really have any comments on the vernal pool section. Scott, what's this one say? Scott, does the aura have these same?
Yeah, I think it's related to what we were just talking about, but my question is, did we say in the bylaw, I just can't remember, we have all these exemptions I don't think exist elsewhere in when we start talking about the aura. And so I know we talked about lawns and stuff, but does it actually read existing lawns, gardens, landscaped or developed areas for the exemption in the bylaw, or is that something that we're further defining here in the reg?
So specifically for vernal pools, you're wondering. I'd have to look in the bylaw to see if that language is actually there in reference to vernal pools.
I'm looking it up.
Okay. Um, so you're saying, does the aura have these same exemptions? Well, these are specific just to vernal pools.
Right.
Um,
That was my understanding, is I think we're defining
yeah,
specific exemptions for an aura for vernal pools, but I just wanted to confirm that. And then I'm wondering if if these were already in the bylaw, we're just repeating what's already in the bylaw, you know, putting what's in the bylaw into reg, or if we're stepping this down and further defining or expanding it here. But
yeah.
but that was my only
Yeah.
question on that one. So maybe we can come back to it because
I'm sorry.
we have
Yeah.
our crack legal assistant.
Yeah, Miriam's gonna look it up.
I looked it up. So it's not in the bylaw. It's in the regs because the commission was making in the last set of regs a determination that in terms of the values of the aura, previously landscaped areas are degraded. They don't have the same benefit to vernal pools than naturally vegetated zones. So the idea is to preserve naturally vegetated zones when possible, but exempting previously landscaped areas. And I thought that we originally had some language about the aura and the distance between the house and the aura being diminished. I can't remember if it's in these regs or not, from the old regs, but that was the understanding. This is not anything to do with the small projects exemptions from the Wetlands Protection Act. They do not exempt vernal pools.
Thanks. So so we're in the bylaw, it says, I'm sorry, Miriam, it says lawns in the bylaw.
No, it does not. I do not believe, whoops, hang on. Excuse me a second. It's been weird. No, I do not believe the word lawn is anywhere in, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. The term vernal pool shall include, in addition to the definitions and regulations of under WPA and 310 CMR 10.0, any confined basin or depression not occurring in existing lawns, gardens, landscaped areas, or driveways, which blah, 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 and then it goes through all the criteria of what defines a vernal pool. So that it's in the bylaw, and that's why it has to be in the regs.
Thank you.
And I would repeat it just for the sake of clarity, so that if somebody, for example, doesn't look at the bylaw and just looks at the regs, that they understand that the bylaw doesn't allow that.
All right. I marked it resolved.
Great. Yep, you did. You checked it off. All right. Next question by Scott Kahn.
Yeah.
Is this true for any wetlands? Isn't this true for any wetland delineation? Which number is that? 324?
Yeah.
The presumption of the existence of a vernal pool area is a closed basin or depression, meaning the definition contained in these regulations may be overcome with a presentation of proponent.
You guys share the document again?
What?
Would you share the document so everybody else could look?
She is.
It is up.
It's shared.
I don't see it. It's just me.
Let's see, a presentation of preponderance of credible evidence that the commission met in the judgment of the commission demonstrates the basin depression of prior area is not provided, cannot provide a vernal pool.
So I didn't have a problem with it. I'm just thinking, do we have to, because I think we're doing this kind of resource type by resource type, and I think what we're saying is that if there's contrary credible evidence to say this isn't a resource area, that we would need to consider it. Right.
Yes.
Which I was just thinking, I think, isn't this true for any resource, like any resource area or wetland area that we're regulating?
You're right. So yeah, so it kind of does, again, it's a little bit of a repeat of language. I mean, you see that same language that it may be overcome by a preponderance of credible evidence. You see that throughout the regulations, like you said, for many different aspects of delineation, or whether something's impacting a bank, that's the kind of general language that goes there. So the question is, do we want to have it specifically also here where it refers to vernal pools again, or do you feel like it's too repetitious?
Well, it's the language that usually regulations there's a structure to how these regulations are written. So usually there's a preamble, then there's a section with defining characteristics, and sometimes additional definitions of terms, and then there's a presumption. And so the language is kind of a formulaic presumption that, as you rightfully are noting, is repeated for all the other resource areas. And it's a paragraph. It's not a very long paragraph, but it's right there so people see it when they're reading that section, and they don't have to go refer to another section to find it. So it makes it clear that it applies to this resource area.
Yep. Does that answer your question, Scott? And are you all right leaving it in there?
It sounds like it is true for any wetland delineation, and we would like to place this under each resource area that we're describing. Will have more or less the same language.
It's the presumption.
It is.
Like the presumption of significance is rebuttable. So, there's this presumption that the resource area is vital to the interests and values of the bylaw, but it can be rebutted with credible evidence. And that's the formula for every section, really.
Yeah, well, I don't think it has, I don't think it does any harm. So I'm fine with it.
That's kind of my thought too with a lot of this, like, doesn't do any harm.
I think the next one's probably mine. It looks like going down there.
Keep moving things around so I can see. Can I check the box then that we
Right,
answered
check the
your question?
box.
Nice. All right. Next
Um,
question is,
I think I deleted, so I did have some, I had some concerns with this section, so I suggested deleting it. It was, so this is where we start going into details of overcoming the presumption of the existence of a vernal pool and having folks present evidence that vernal pool species don't breed or have not bred. I just, practically speaking, there are a lot of reasons why a species may not breed or in a particular year in a vernal pool. And just practically speaking, to try to get people to collect that or produce it and how we would verify it, I just, to me, it seems more problematic than it's worth. So I recommended deleting it. And they're staying with, I think there are other physical characteristics that are further described in this section down that probably are easier maybe to show that are, you know, physical or chemical, rather than trying to get people to go out and, I mean, I don't know, if someone came through and collected all the eggs out of a particular vernal pool just before you happen to go look at it, does that not make it a vernal pool?
Well, I think that that would be up to the discretion of the commission, whether they would accept that as, you know, evidence. And, you know, the commission could at its own discretion say, you know what, this 1 year of evidence that's presented isn't sufficient and we want this area monitored. So the commission always has the authority to decide whether the evidence is sufficient or not. These set of criteria comes from MACC. This was vetted very carefully by Patrick Garner, who's a vernal pool expert. And, you know, he was making it clear that he thought evidence breeding and the, you know, the kind of physical characteristics go hand in hand in terms of a debate about a vernal pool. And it could be that the commission would go out and collect information, not just the landowner would. So, you know, if there was a dispute between the commission and a landowner, you know, both parties might have an interest in finding out either the absence of information or information. So I guess my recommendation would be to keep it in because it is kind of the formula that's used by many other commissions, so that it would be standardizing these criteria. But you're right, whether or not a pool holds water or not is maybe a different factor than whether or not it actually is breeding. There can be things, other effects. One of my neighbor's vernal pools stopped breeding because the trees got cut down.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, there are many things that could affect whether or not critters are using a vernal pool for disease is one. There are many other things that could be in the short term, but not the long term, that could affect the use of that. And this is prescribing, you know, a minimum of 1 spring season. So I just don't think it's a great measure to use to decide whether or not it's a vernal pool or not.
Well,
with all respect to,
it's a minimum of 1 spring. The commission could say that 1 spring is insufficient, but it couldn't be less than 1 spring.
Doesn't somewhere later, further down, Beth, I think it also, does it get into like 1 out of 3, or I can't remember.
For holding water, it has to show that it's able to hold water for at least 2 continuous months for 3 out of 5 consecutive years.
Well, I hear you, Miriam. But if it were me, I would delete it. But I'd love to hear from my fellow commissioners.
Yeah, for me, it's sort of, there's this list of criteria that you would look for, and um for me, it's sort of like you don't necessarily want to get rid of one of them because you don't necessarily need all of them, but that may just be one of them. You know what I mean? Um,
Oh, so you're saying this isn't inclusive?
well, I was wondering this word shall, should it be like may consider, so that
I,
say somebody brings in evidence, they don't have this entire list of evidence, but they have four of the five, you know, that kind of thing.
I think,
Um,
I think you can use the word shall and you still have discretion. It doesn't mean that you are gonna require it. You're gonna make, it doesn't say
oh,
you can only make your decision if number 3.252, um,
yeah,
you know, but it's that you're gonna consider these and you may rule it off. Say, you know, we've considered it and we don't think it's important. We're gonna just waive that number, because we just don't.
yeah,
think it's important. So it's gonna vary from situation to situation, I think. It's very situation specific.
I just think it could be difficult if we had a landowner coming in saying, I have evidence that there no species of bred in my vernal pool. I'd like to call it not a vernal pool. And then we could say, well, we're duly noted and we did consider, but we're not going to, we're still going to consider a vernal pool. And if that's, I'm just trying to think, are there any cases where we would, in and of itself, just use that one and eliminate it? And if that's not the case, that's why I was saying we'd get rid of it. But if you, I'd be okay if we wanted to say to weaken it some in May, as you said, Beth, or or several of these, if more than one of these were the case, that we would consider that, I'd be okay with that too.
mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
What's it? Barnacle species never once. Yeah.
I mean, if it's all of them, you could technically be on the line to have a delay on a project for 5 years while you collect data and fool around, maybe you have a vernal pool, maybe you don't. But when we start out with, if you've got a depression that doesn't even have water in it, we presume it's going to be a vernal pool. That strikes me as a scary way to start the proposition.
Yeah, I think I guess I hear what you're saying, Scott. My one thought would just be if this is sort of a standard way that a lot of people, like wetland scientists and people, are out there looking for vernal pools, and it's just one of, there's this whole list of what should be considered to define whether it is or isn't a vernal pool. And this is that 3252 happens to be what wetland scientists, one of the many things that they do look for, and then we don't have it in here. That seems a little strange to me too. But I hear what you're saying, that you certainly don't just want to base it on that one characteristic of the vernal pool. Certainly not. And I see the risk in even thinking that somebody might come forward and say that.
Beth, can I just throw out this thought, is that if you were to remove that, then none of the standards for rebutting or concluding that something is not a vernal pool have to do with breeding. Then you're defining something based on its capacity to be a breeding habitat, but then you're saying that you can overcome the presumption by showing that it didn't have water, or that it isn't the right depth, or it has to be also, the commission has to have the authority to say, we need to know whether there's breeding habitat and there actually is anything breeding there. And the commission could commission a study. It could require an applicant to collect data. The commission could go out and do its own inspections in the spring if it wanted to confirm whether that was accurate or not. But if you just take out all mention of breeding, then it seems like you've just changed the definition of a vernal pool, and you can't do that because the definition is in the bylaw. And
The definition is tied to breeding habitat,
yes,
defined this way, Miriam, in the bylaw.
it says, well, you can go look at it, but it includes, I'm reading, it has to be at least 200 cubic feet at some time during most years, is free of predatory fish, and provides essential breeding and rearing functions for amphibians, reptiles, or other vernal pool community species. And then it says the presumption of vernal pool habitat may be overcome, however, with the presentation of credible evidence, which in the judgment of the commission demonstrates that the wetland does not provide or cannot provide vernal pool habitat features. The commission shall take into consideration whether the spring vernal pool season is one with normal or above normal water tables, blah, blah, blah. There's some stuff about precipitation. So it is tied to the breeding functions. It's mentioned in the definition. So I don't think you can, and then there's another section of the bylaw that also mentions that I can look for it under general presumption.
I wonder if there's a way to, in 3.25, Beth, to, if we kept that in and knowing that it's one part, but it's not, none of the, it sounds to me, well, but maybe the way that you wrote it, or that it's in the bylaw, it sounds to me like you have to, like, if any one of these factors then were disproven, then it wouldn't meet the definition as defined in the bylaw. So then it wouldn't be a vernal pool. That's how I just heard you. Because if we defined it that way in the bylaw, that it does, a vernal pool provides all those things. Then if it didn't provide any of them, then it by definition it's not a vernal pool. I think that's what you're saying, and that's why you would want to see this kept in.
Well, because it references breeding habitat. So, you've got habitat you think is capable of breeding, but you might also want evidence of breeding.
And if there isn't evidence, then it wouldn't be a vernal pool. That's what I just heard you say.
I think you probably need to have more than just whether or not you found evidence in 1 year, because, as I said, and you just mentioned, there can be a lot of factors that might disrupt breeding in one season. But if you have all these other physical characteristics that show that over time, vernal pool conditions would be present, it seems to me that it would be they wouldn't have done. I would say it's one variable. I'm suggesting just keeping it in, but I think that the commission has to use some discretion in a case-by-case basis about how you apply these.
And I'm thinking that it's best if the regulations are really clear and not every single thing has to come to the commission for interpretation and discretion. So especially for things like this, that could be pretty, I'm seeing applicants in our consistency with how we would do it. And some folks have more resources than others. And, so we're just trying to streamline it. I was trying to go with things that could be measured, but easily to try to sort through this. But I do think I would prefer to make it as clear in the regs, so we're not leaving it open-ended for everything to come, maybe for varying consistency of decisions before the commission.
So would it, like, get rid of your concerns if we had it say, the commission shall consider all of the following? And therefore, if somebody came to us trying to prove that something was not a vernal pool, we would need to ask them for evidence of all of these things. So not just that one. If your fear really was that somebody could come and just have done that one thing and we would have to say it's not a vernal pool. So that we could have that. and then again, when you're concerned that it'd be tricky to find this kind of information, but again, if somebody's coming to us saying, we don't think this is a vernal pool, we may be saying to them, well, you really need like a wetland scientist or somebody to prove that to us. And to me, most wetland scientists are going to be kind of going after this breeding part of it too. You know, I think the average person, like you said, isn't going to be able to figure that out really or whatever. But if they're hiring somebody to really prove that it's not a vernal pool, then they would be looking at that. But what do you think about adding the commission shall consider all of the following? Does that help?
So are we saying that we would consider all the following and that all the following criteria would need to be met? Or are we saying that some of the criteria would need to be met or one of the criteria would need to be met?
Yeah, right. That's the question. That's how do
I mean,
we
that's what I'm
want that?
trying to, for me, I prefer it to be more clear to say something like, if we're going to write criteria to just say that this isn't going to be a vernal pool, then I would presume if you meet the criteria, then it's not a vernal pool. But if we're, so to any way we could make it more clear, if it's 3 out of 5, if it's 1 out of 5, or if it's 5 out of however many, that's what I'm looking for.
I don't think this is a performance standard.
How about that?
It's not, and I don't think there's any evidence in these regs or in the science of 3 out of the 5 being the right right consideration. I think this is a methodology for laying out data that the commission can consider. I think the word shall or may, I think that either of those is fine. I think the word consider is soft enough to indicate that the commission has discretion and that these are to be evaluated based on what the commission decides is important. But 3 out of the 5 seems arbitrary to me, and I don't know what would that be based on. Where are we pulling that from vernal pool science that 3 out of 5 is sufficient? Some of these are more important than others. So
yeah, how I would say, Miriam, is it would be best to write this so that all the criteria would need to be met, which I think is how it is being worded now.
I just changed it to say, in case you can't see it, Miriam, for the purpose of overcoming the presumption of the existence of a vernal pool, the following criteria must be met. And then it's going to have the full list.
you can do that, and then with the understanding that you may waive some things because you might decide, okay, didn't meet it.
Yeah.
But we're gonna determine it's not a vernal pool anyway, I guess.
All right, well, we'll leave it like that for now. That seems to meet what Scott was concerned about. So we can just leave it for now. So then we're still gonna
Yeah, and to be clear, if you have it worded this way, how I read it is all of those would need to be true. In which case, I'm good with that because then it's pretty clear that you'd have to prove all of those.
Well, 3.254 is not something that you would prove. It's a, wait, I'm in the wrong place. Oh, I'm sorry.
so then your next comment, Scott, is would it need to be done by a wetland scientist? And
Right.
I think we talked about that, yeah, this would need to
I
be
mean,
done.
they're starting to get pretty technical work here. So I'm guessing it would need to be done and at the expense of the applicant. So we're including standards in here that could be costly for people to have to show if they're going to say it's not a wetland or a vernal pool.
Yeah.
Well, just so you're aware, it's not like 3.2.54 is not written as a performance standard.
I think we're, well, I don't know which one we're on there. It's on ours, it's 3.2.53.
No, I think I'm talking about.
Several months of pH and dissolved oxygen measurements
No, I'm
yielding
talking about
values
vertical.
incompatible with amphibian or reptile breeding.
No, what I have is vernal pools may be found at various locations throughout
Yeah.
the floodplain.
We-
That's
Yeah, we
5.4.
talked about that one.
Yes, I think this whole thing, if there's a vernal pool that as a commission, we looked at it or somehow it got delineated that way and a property owner wants to argue it. And this is what, I think that this is a good list of what we would want them to provide. I think it would need to be by some kind of a wetland scientist that would have to do this for them. And that is true for a number of things in the regs, unfortunately, right? So does Scott, are you all right then with this one? Since we changed the intro to say it has to be met?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yeah,
Small,
Sorry, I just wanted to say, I certainly understand, the trepidation of trying to, decide if something's a vernal pool, on the basis of one observation. So I do think because there could be a drought or whatever. So I certainly support Scott's line of thinking, and I think we're headed to a good place with the.
okay, good. Good. Next we have, should this be or is small project exemptions for 341, right? That's the first performance standard. No activity or work that will result in altering the vernal pool or the aura envelope of any vernal pool shall be permitted by the commission, except upon preponderance of credible evidence from a competent source showing that any proposed work and its natural and consequential effects shall have no unacceptable significant values.
I think I was just flagging it for later. I think in the bylaw, and I'd have to go back and look at this too. I know we made it 100, right? And I think we've also said there's no like inner, like the whole aura is
For a vernal pool.
protected. I just wanted to flag when we get around to small project exemptions, we already said in the bylaw too, we exempted lawns and blah, 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 like what we just talked about. So I think we just need to circle around just to tie these things together. So it's clear that whether or not the small project exemptions apply in vernal pools or if they don't. And
Well,
then-
the bylaw says that small project permits cannot be in a resource area, and a vernal pool is a resource area.
Right, but let's say a small I think what we also just said would be if you want to build a small shed in a lawn adjacent to a vernal pool, that's okay, right? Because in the bylaw, it says the
Vernal pool.
lots were
The
exempted.
aura is not extended. So if it's not in the aura of there is no vernal pool aura in the lawn. Because that's not protected because it's already, or it's protected to the same standard. Maybe it's protected as aura, but not as a no disturb zone. So there's different levels. So the idea with a vernal pool is that the 100-foot aura is a no disturb zone, but you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't require the lawn. But you can't put a small project into a vernal pool.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. I'm just saying when we get around later for clarity, I think that could be confusing. So we should.
Yeah.
So when we get to the small projects section, we should make sure there's some kind of clarity about this.
Yeah.
Okay. We will do that. Make sure it's very clear. All right, we are now into land, underwater bodies and waterways. again, I don't think I really had any changes to this. So much of it is from the state regulations. Scott
I've
has
got
a
a
question.
comment on repetition again. 414 and 416 start with land underwater in conjunction with banks confines floodwater with a definite channel during most frequent storms. It's repeated.
For which one? 441?
414 and
Oh,
416,
sorry.
I think.
Anywhere in conjunction with bank confines floodwater within a definite channel during most frequent storms. Filling within this channel blocks flows. Okay. And 4 and 6. Underwater in conjunction with bank storms to combine floodwater with a definite channel during most frequent storms. Yes. Yes, I think we can get rid of where did it go? 414,
414, yeah,
because it's really the same thing.
yeah.
6.
And I have a question about 41. Are we ready?
Yep.
413 right above it.
Yep.
The asphalt is likely to be as significant to flood control and storm damage prevention. The way it's phrased just seems funny to me because if you pave it, it's a contributor to our problem, but it sort of, I don't know, it didn't read that way to me.
Well, I think the thinking is that it's both, it's significant, we're meaning it could also contribute to flooding, but it could also be beneficial for flood control. For example, if you have levees or retaining walls, or you've got abutments to bridge to a dam where it's, some of it is land underwater, but it's paved.
Well, those
like-
are two very separate ideas, and if we want to express that, we should have them in two separate lines, I think. Yeah, you can channel stuff and provide benefits, and yeah, you can cause problems.
Well, I would say that this statement isn't saying that. It's just saying that it is important for flood control and storm damage prevention.
It also causes floods and damage, so that's a very tricky statement to make. I don't like it the way it's phrased. Generally, I would think we would not want people to be paving or confining waterways in any way. That would be the priority. And sometimes you do it for flood control, but that's a whole nother matter.
Well, that's kind of what I think this is pointing to, is that you can have land underwater and waterways, which has to be for flood control paved or some sort of impervious material. So, I think the 4.12 talks about pervious material. 4.13 mentions that there could be circumstances where impervious material is necessary. And that's why it's saying it's significant to this value, because flood control and storm damage prevention are two of the values in the bylaw. So it's saying, in some situations, it is necessary to protect the values of the bylaw.
Well, at a minimum, I think we need a little bit of a rephrase there.
Yeah. Almost saying something like in some situations, land underwater that is composed of impervious surfaces. You could even just say maybe being used for, significant flood control and storm damage.
I mean, the trouble with it is even when you do it for flood control and damage prevention, a lot of times you're just moving it downstream and somebody else gets the energy directed at them. But I get the point. It's just phrasing.
I think that's why it's phrased in a kind of a vague way. It's not saying declaratively that it's necessary. It's just saying it is significant, it's important. And that it may be relevant in some situations.
Some situations when. Some situations when composed of concrete as for other articles with um
It
you
can be
wanna say
beneficial. You can just say it. It can be beneficial.
Yeah, I think we want to say, let's see, in some situations where land or water is composed of concrete, asphalt, or other artificial impervious materials, and is being used for flood control and storm damage prevention. I don't know if the word beneficial is right. It's almost like I don't know.
Why don't you say in some situations where it, LWW is composed of blah, blah, blah. Said land may be important for flood control and storm damage. Get rid of the word significant and just say may be important.
Is that better, Jan?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm kind of thinking may work to help with flood control and storm damage, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't need to parse the word, but it can, the trouble in my mind is that it can really be a bad thing.
Right, but I think the point, and can't think of too many spots in Shutesbury, although Lake Wyola Dam, places where there are rivers that happen to have sort of like a concrete spillway or something like that, where it is land underwater, but it's composed of this, but it's not a horrible thing. It's not something that we're going to tell somebody to take out because it's impervious, because it's actually needed at that location for flood control and storm damage prevention. So I think it's just the point to kind of say that these things do exist out there.
Yeah, if you take an intermittent stream and you run it through a culvert, the culvert becomes the bank and the land under water bodies.
Right.
So, and that's might be very important for stormwater control. So, yeah.
All right. I know Scott had a comment down here. Jan, did you have any others in this 4.1 section? No? Okay. Scott. So shall have no adverse effect upon any of the bylaw values, upon any of the land and order functions. Assumption where a project involves building within or upon. Move this over.
This isn't a huge concern, but I'm just saying that I think because it's a presumption, it's not a performance standard. But I'm going to have the same concern later down this document. But I think where it's similar to what we had said before, that we're just kind of leaving it open that you can rebut or rebut any of these, and that the commission would have to make a determination around that. And so I guess I'm fine with that being a presumption. Maybe in the interest of time, we can move on to the performance standards.
Could I just make a comment? Just looking at what Scott's comment was, I think it's important. Keep in mind that like the 10% or whatever it was, 500 square feet. Was that what it was? 10% or 5%? 500 square feet. That it's
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't exist under the Wetlands Protection Act, so you'd be introducing an exemption that would make the bylaw less protective than you, because you wouldn't have that presumption under the Wetlands Protection Act. You're not allowed to alter 10% of land under water bodies. That'd be like 10% of Lake Wyola. That'd
Yeah.
be 28.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe when we get to the remainder of this, we can talk more about that.
The performance standards.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
so other than small projects, thinking of docks, boats, ramps, etc.
So here is a no activity, right? Up to the maintenance of existing structures. And I'm just wondering if is that truly the case that we'll have no activity? So there would be no disturbance of land underwater.
Except by a showing that the proposed work will not have a significant cumulative effect on the values. So that's sort of the standard language of all of the performance standards. That, no activity unless you can show, so it puts the burden on the applicant to demonstrate with the preponderance of credible evidence that what they're proposing will not harm the values of the bylaw. And then the commission has to make a determination whether or not they've met that burden. So that's sort of basically the regulatory framework for all of the regulations.
Yeah, it is that kind of a statement, though. It always is confusing because then if you look at 442, the commission
Right.
may allow activity on land underwater only if such activity will not impair the following. So that's
Yeah, so there's
starting
like,
to, so
right,
it's starting to say that
there's a general standard and what the presumption standard is, and then you get down to the specifics of how you would figure that out with these additional performance standards.
And I guess my concern with the way that it's written is, pretty much any project's going to have some impact on some of these, even very small projects, and even to a very small degree. And so I'm just, maybe it's similar to my comment around the vernal pools, but is it all these, is it some of these? To what degree are we talking about? Because we're just kind of laying out. The purpose of regs are to really try to take what was in the bylaw and make it clear for people so they really understand. And I don't think this is very clear in terms of what types of projects may be allowed or not. Would a canoe launch or a boat launch or these types of other things, I think you could argue they might have some small impacts on some of these things. My guess is they're not very large, and we probably would allow them. There are probably some things, and that's where my comments around square footage came in. If you look at 4.44, it talks about where we would need to get additional studies of the 10% or 5,000 square feet. So I'm just wondering if there's some amount that could be clear, small projects that would be allowed. But
can I respond to this? So the way I read this, if you go back to the 4 where are we going? 4.41, and that's the general performance standard, which is that no project basically is allowed that will have a cumulative or significant effect. So negligible effects or minimal effects are allowed because that's the standard, is significant or cumulative. And then it gets into the more specifics, the next standard, which is that, the commission may allow activity as long as it doesn't impair these things. And that's kind of the standard of how you figure out what is significant or cumulative. So, you know, a small dock or a small dredging project or something like that isn't going to necessarily affect these three things in any significant way. When you get down to 4.44, where we were talking about the 10%, that's taken straight out of 310 CMR 10.60. So you
I think all of this is, I think starting with 441 and going all the way down, it's exactly what's in the state
Yeah,
regulations.
you can take this out of the regulations, but it still applies because under the Wetlands Protection Act, these are the standards. And land under water bodies is protected resource area under the state regs. So you know, whether you have them in this regs or not, land under water bodies is a protected resource under the bylaw. It is under the state regs. So the idea was to have the regulations agree with each other so that there's no confusion and you don't have like one set of standards under the bylaw. But I think if you make these regulations weaker than the state law, that's a little confusing, given that the bylaw by definition for home rule is supposed to be at least as protective, if not more protective. So,
Well, if we are just repeating verbatim the State Wetlands Protection Act, then we could take them out because we're writing the regs for the bylaw, right?
well, except you want to make sure that under the bylaw, you're applying the same standard. Otherwise, why have a bylaw? You're basically saying the bylaw isn't important. We're only using the state regs.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, Miriam. What I'm saying is I think the bylaw, we have areas that are more protective and go into more detail or and I agree we can't weaken the State Wetlands Protection Act. I also don't think, I'm just thinking about previous comments that we've received from legal counsel that we need not repeat what's already in the State Wetlands Protection Act. And so I thought we were writing the regs for the bylaw.
Well, what you need to do is make sure that it's clear that you're incorporating the state reg. So, you know, for example, you could take out some of this language and you could say the regs for land under waterways and water bodies shall be as stated in 310 CMR 10.6, and that would be fine, except then
I'd do that.
but then that means that people have to go back to those regs, and sometimes that's has been confusing, and the feedback that people have given is that they would like this to be more understandable on its own without all the references to other regulations. But
Well, I think that the problem, and I had this comment in there too, when we start to incorporate by reference some parts of these and other things, when those regs change, then our regs become outdated. And so I think that's an excellent suggestion to take this section and just incorporate the State Wetlands Protection Act. I
well,
would,
you
I
could say
would
it as,
go for that.
you see it, you know, you could say 10.6 and then, or as amended. But for example, the performance standards in 10.56 4A5, that's very specific. I wouldn't take that reference out. But yeah, if you want to, you could take out 4.44 and just say, you know, the commission incorporates the regulations as stated in, and then quote the passage citation. And there are probably some other places where you can do that, and that's fine. It condenses it. It makes it a little harder for the general public to read it.
I was talking about 4.41. I mean, that's when we started this, and you said that 4.41, 42 are all
I think,
Taken
verbatim out of the State
Said that.
Wetlands
I'd
Protection
have to
Act. So
I don't know for sure if they're verbatim or not. They sound verbatim, but I'd have to look.
I just take them out.
Yeah, well, so I wrote a note down about that, and I can go back to especially just, you know, this land underwater section and see how much of it, especially this performance standard section, is straight out of the Wetlands Protection Act and make just a reference like that to it, which is fine.
All right. I'm good with that.
All right. So then you have a couple other comments here, but I think maybe we addressed them, right?
Well, they might be addressed if there's already, I mean, if the state regs are that open-ended, and we're not really looking to further define or nor can we really, if, you know, through our bylaw, we can't further define what's already in state statute. So if it's written in state statute this way, then I just think we reference it and move on.
Okay. All right, land subject to flooding. Ordering and isolated.
What?
I see no comments. I see no comments. Jan, did you have any comments in this section? Or Bob?
I do have at least one comment. In 521, the definitions,
Yep.
it goes through what all you can be adjacent to develop a floodplain essentially. And it includes the word ditches. That gave me a little grief. So we got a drainage ditch on the side of a road that overflows into something routinely because who knows, somebody's driveway is tipped wrong. I don't know about ditches. That just seems like it doesn't belong here.
Hmm.
I would say that sometimes ditches are built in areas that are already in a flood zone. So they're basically modified. I mean, that's kind of because that's where the water floods to. I mean, you see that sometimes in farm fields where there's a ditch that's, you know, basically constructed in an area that probably was part of bordering land subject to flooding at some time.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to be subject
mean-
to mitigation, so it wouldn't have to be significant for flood control to be BLSF.
Yeah. I kind of agree with that. I think it should stay in just because, you know, oftentimes people refer even to creeks and intermittent streams as ditches.
I guess the difference is that a ditch isn't a natural body.
Again, it all, to me, like, just with my experience with wetlands, a body of water that's flowing, some people call them streams, some people call them brooks, some people call them creeks, some people call them ditches. And how do you, you know, that's why all those names are there, because, you know, I think that's why that's in there, really, is because of the different names that flowing bodies of water are given often.
I think that the point is also whether or not it's receiving and being inundated by floodwaters. Whether it's been modified or not, if it's receiving floodwater on a regular basis in a flood zone, then it's BLSF or ILSF. If it's subject to flooding, so that's really the definition, and these are just some of the different areas where you can see it. So you could have a ditch that at certain times of the year floods over, and then the land around it becomes bordering land subject to flooding. Because the ditch is kind of like where the channel is, but it's the surrounding flat topography that becomes the floodplain. It's not so much the ditch, but it's the land around the ditch.
I think that's what concerns me in cases where ditches have been dug to drain roadways and so on. They are leaving the water off someplace that people haven't necessarily agreed to, and now you're calling that something that it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and in the end, I don't maybe even see the benefit to having it in there in a way that if there's, you know, something that's carrying water, if there's a channel, under our definitions of what a stream is, you know, there has to be a defined channel, there has to be the water has to be moving under a gradient. And when that exists, it should be called a stream, really. So that's why I think all these other words were actually just put in here because people use them. But maybe we shouldn't, you know, necessarily have them in there because we should just be calling anything that we define as an intermittent stream an intermittent stream.
I'll agree with that, yes. And we've defined that elsewhere and it's more clear. So even if I call it a brook, it doesn't matter if you've got a definition that defines it better.
Yeah, it's more based on the hydrologic quality of it.
I am seeing that if you look at 3.10, 310 CMR 10.57, I believe it makes reference to ditches.
So that's BLSF and they use the same language?
Yeah, help me just do a search to find it. I think so. No, maybe they don't. Can't see in this document. Let me search. No, AI, Google's telling me that. I wouldn't trust that as a source, reliable source. Sorry.
Well, that's just something we can look into that and see if
bordering land subject to flooding refers to a shallow trench or channel located along the edge of a low-lying area that is prone to flooding from nearby rivers, streams, or other water bodies, essentially acting as a drainage pathway to help manage floodwaters by diverting them away from the landed borders.
that's the definition of a ditch.
That is the definition of lands that flood.
Oh, okay.
I saw it. So
yeah. So at this point, we can just take those out. I think they were really just other terms for a stream. But maybe take a quick look back at the state regs to see where that is. But all right. There's some stuff from Scott. Oops.
So I think this comment is about where we start to incorporate things like NOAA Atlas 14, volume 10. And maybe latest version gets to this or not, but I was just thinking about this comment that when we start to incorporate in this way, it could make the regs out of date if that's not what's really needed. Same for 2.2, where it's methodology set forth. When they update the methodologies, it could put the regs out of date. But let me just ask, before we get too far into this one, is this too just a regurgitation of the State Wetlands Protection Act, or are we doing something novel under the wetlands bylaw here?
This is novel. This is the NOAA Atlas 14 was recommended in the new proposed regulation overhaul for the Wetlands Protection Act, but I don't believe that overhaul has been approved. This
Not
was
yet.
a strong recommendation from Patrick Gardner that we use NOAA Atlas 14 or as amended, and he felt like that was sufficient to capture future generations of more up-to-date precipitation data. NOAA Atlas being a compendium that's updated regularly, as opposed to the old compendium that was used under the Wetlands Protection Act that was published in 1960 and has not been updated. So that was what we're trying to replace, is using 1960s precipitation data.
So maybe just, I was just gonna say, in the interest of time, maybe, I don't know if there's a better way of incorporating these here in a way that gives the commission flexibility to use this evolving standard. I'm sure science is always evolving, and NOAA Atlas 14 volume 10 may be, updated. And I think maybe that one's okay because it's our latest version. Maybe the next one could also have like latest versions of whatever they are. And that's fine. If we think it's not going to cause us to have to reissue regs, I'm fine with it. So I don't want to spend too much time on it.
I think I'm forgetting what technical release number 55 is, am I right? And that's a hydric soils methodology.
Yeah, it's urban hydrology for small watersheds, and it's USDA, and it's from 1986, section 4, and then there's that reference, and then also section 4 hydrology National Engineering Handbook 1972. There's a few documents referenced.
The next page is and then I would say this is flexible language, because if you look at the first paragraph, it says it may require the applicant to determine the boundary by engineering calculations, which shall be, you could say, or you could say which may include, if you want to qualify it, or you might want to add another section or any other methodology that seems more current, but you always have the discretion to decide. The point here is to give applicants advance warning as much as possible about what you're looking for, so that they can be prepared in advance if they need to tell their engineer what precipitation data to put into HydroCAD. It's becoming pretty commonplace for people to use NOAA Atlas. Why don't you say which may include?
Yeah, I just changed the shall to may, which may be, and then it lists those. And as we said, the first one has or latest version built in to the statement. This one is specific documents. So
I don't think there's anything more current replacing it except for the NRCS from 1986, which is.
Robert.
Wonder if it could be the latest versions of the standard methodology.
Check the ball. I believe it's coming up.
Based on the standard methodology, based upon the standard methodology sets forth in blah blah blah.
Yeah, or the latest versions of the standard methodologies set forth, or latest versions at the end or something. I don't know. That's fine by me.
Or you could say as set forth in or by its successor, if there is a successor.
I think they're all good.
Blah blah blah. Let's just put here. Or its successor, and I can put it up top over the other one too.
Or you could say any relevant successor.
Doing this.
That's not.
Hydrology. For this one too.
You know what? Yeah.
I'm just gonna do that.
Or you could just do is after the date in each of the parentheses, say or as amended. And that captures it.
Yeah,
86 or as amended, 1972 or as amended, and that captures it.
Yeah, but when you say or any relevant successor, it kind of includes like what if a completely new document comes, so it isn't really as amended, it's something new, but it is really the relevant successor. I just kind of like that better. In case somebody
good.
creates a whole new document. All right. Good.
The
Thank
next
you.
one there, yeah. I just didn't know, same thing. It's like if they amend the state regs,
Well, I don't know about that because we refer to particular sections of the regs kind of throughout
right.
these regulations. So if we start nitpicking about that, I think that might be a problem.
Well, do we need to, are we doing something new here, Beth? Or are we just reiterating what the state regs are?
This is new because we're actually, we're actually referring to the regs. We're referencing them.
This
So
is also,
this is some,
also about isolated land subject to flooding, which is a little different.
yeah.
Okay, so if they amend the state regs, you don't see a problem with, you think it will automatically translate to ours that way?
I think
Again, I don't have a problem with it.
I think I think the thing is that I see what you're saying, but we refer to the state regs in multiple places in these regulations. So when the new state regs do come out, a lot of towns across the state, unfortunately, are really going to have to look at their regulations to see how they match up with the new state regs. So we would have to really go through and look at all of our references to certain sections and also other things.
Okay,
Yeah, you just have to update your regs if the numeration changes.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get out of doing that.
Yeah. All right. Performance standards.
All right. So before we get into the performance standards, let me just ask here then, are the performance standards of this section just because I have comments very similar to what we just talked about for previously, where we said that this was kind of a regurgitation of the State Wetlands Protection Act. And so I'm wondering, are these performance standards the same, 5.4.21, or are these new for the
I think
bylaw?
they're very much the same, but a little bit different.
I would have to agree, because especially because of isolated land subject to flooding is a little
Yeah.
and I would have to go back and do a word search to kind of tell you that, Scott. I mean, most commissions that I have done updated regulations, their regulations are fairly long, and they include a lot of this kind of patter that is mirroring the state regs with some differences here and there, but a lot of the language being the same. Again, the part of the argument is not just to say we're incorporating the state regs, but to have it in this document is saying these regulations are defending and explaining this bylaw, which stands on its own independent of the Wetlands Protection Act. And the more references you have specifically to the Wetlands Protection Act, the more it looks like this is just a regurgitation of the Wetlands Protection Act, which is not the intention of the bylaw. So
that's why I was asking if this was an actual regurgitation, because the other one we said it was.
It might be. I'd have to check. I don't know, but that's part of the rationale for having some repetitious language here that is taken from the state regs is for this reason. That's a stylistic decision for the commission to make about how it wants to do that. So I don't know offhand how much is taken verbatim. A lot of this is borrowed from other commissions' regulations where, you know, we found in studying them, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different sets of regulations were all using the same language. So it looked like there was a consensus approach across communities, and it felt like that's kind of an emerging standard to use.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much, like Miriam said, this is exactly what's in the Wetlands Protection Act, but like land underwater, I can look and see, and if there's an opportunity here for us to just reference the state regs and take out some of the language, you know, we can do that. But I think it might be a little bit tweaked, a little bit different, but have the same general idea of what's in the regs, but I can take a look.
Yeah, that would be great. And then if it's different, then maybe we could come back to it. But if we're just incorporating what's there, then so be it.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. I keep having to move my pictures back and forth so I can see. What did I do here? Notwithstanding the above, no project may be permitted within BLS where such work would adversely affect a vernal pool or its aura unless the project meets the performance standards in section 3.4. So I think I'm referring back to, it must be the vernal pool section.
I'm wondering if you even need to say that. If we're dealing with a vernal pool, that should have been covered under vernal pools.
Well, the reason is that sometimes you see vernal pools, and this is common actually, that the vernal pool is within another resource area, like bordering land subject to flooding. So you have multiple resource areas. Bordering land subject to flooding does not have an aura, whereas a vernal pool does. So you can't say, oh, if it's inside of bordering land subject to flooding, then it's fine. You can just, you know, kind of ignore it. You have to know where the aura is, the vernal pool, because BLSF doesn't have an aura. Neither does ILSF.
Yeah.
So saying that there is just, I think, a good point to be making for clarity, and so that somebody doesn't mistakenly think that one resource area kind of trumps the other. And if that's the case, vernal pools trump the other because it has higher level of environmental sensitivity.
Okay, I'm good with that. All right, the aura, what time is it? Oh, 7:54. Is 8 o'clock a cutoff for certain people, or can we look at the aura?
It is for me.
So we have 6 minutes. Maybe we can just get through the preamble of the aura. What did I do here? I think I was maybe combining a few things. Yeah. So I was just moving a few sentences around to just kind of organize things a little bit better. These last 2 ones seemed like they had just been for 6.110, 6.111. Just felt to me like they fit in under a couple of the other ones, a couple of the other points. So I was just moving around some sentences. Hope people are okay with that.
I do have a term question. Under 6.1.3.3.4, we're protecting fish and shellfish. Shellfish tends to be a term that implies harvest. And I wonder if we want to use shellfish or if we want to use mollusks.
Isn't that one of the values of the bylaw? Protecting shellfish.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that you definitely see the term shellfish a lot more.
Shellfish is in the bylaw.
bylaw, state regs.
Yeah,
It's kind of weird because in inland, that doesn't make much sense.
well, there's snails and fairy shrimp.
Yeah, but it's generally about, well, okay, never mind. In the fish world, we're not harvesting here, but okay.
Yeah, it's not really about harvesting, it's about wildlife habitat. Not just talking about aquaculture, but
Mussels.
so I didn't see, did you change that, Beth?
No, I left it as shellfish. Okay, so then I was just moving a couple things around, and let's see, Scott had a comment. I was suggesting, I'm gonna move my pictures again over here.
I-
I was
Yeah,
suggesting
and I
that-
don't think we are suggesting a larger or just the way it's,
Which section are we looking at?
We're looking at 6112, right, Scott? Certain resource areas such as vernal pools and streams with cold water fisheries, riverfront area, estimated and priority habitats of rare species, as well as core habitats supporting uncommon natural areas are highly sensitive and require larger buffers from human impacts to reduce the risk of disturbance.
That was meant as not a capital B buffer, but as a low B, but small b buffer. So, larger protection zones or natural, undisturbed zones, whatever you want to call it, but it's more of this is in preamble, so, it's stating a scientific fact and it's not a regulatory condition.
Maybe we get rid of the word sort of require, because sometimes that may make people think. So are highly sensitive and needs, may need, you could even say, may need larger surrounding areas.
I think larger buffers is okay, as long as you're put the may need, so it doesn't sound like it's a regulatory term. It wasn't meant as a regulatory term.
Does that help, Scott?
yeah, I think so. I just,
Impacts to reduce the risk of disturbance. I kind of agree that the word buffer is confusing. May need larger protection
yeah,
areas.
I think that might be more clear. Because what we're not trying to, it makes it sound like we're trying to make something bigger than what we end up doing in the definitions, and that's where it's, because we're saying there's a no disturb for the 100.
You could say may need larger zones of native or naturally vegetated landscape. I mean, would another way of saying may need a greater area.
Yeah, I just changed it to are highly sensitive and may need more protection from human impacts to reduce the risk of disturbance. So it's just sort of giving that idea of like, those are special areas and they may need more protection. So that doesn't necessarily describe the area around them like it had before, but it still maybe gives the idea that they may need more protection.
That seems fine.
All right.
Good.
Right. What was that other comment?
I think it's just checking that reference of 2A through 2C.
Oh. Huh. Whoop. Farm standards.
Are you guys going past 8?
Probably not now. Maybe we stop here. The Aura performance standards is where we're at. Is everybody good with stopping at this point?
I am.
Gonna go watch your football.
Football's over, but dinner is.
Oh, Oh, who won?
Do you want me to do a spoiler alert? How about people are
I'm
taping?
not gonna watch it. Oh,
I
you
can't do
kinda,
that. My oath as conservation commissioner did not include spoiler alert. You'll have to look it up. But I do know who won.
okay then. Tom, you have your hand up?
Hi, yeah, thanks. I love you guys and I think you do great work and please take this the right way. I just worry that you might not be, it might not be appropriate to share a document like a Google Doc and get comments from members behind the scenes of a public meeting. It could, from what I've been doing research on during your meeting, did you get any permission to do that? It might be an open meeting law violation. And I would rather you know now that that might be the case, or unless you can tell me that I'm completely mistaken and you might
No,
have
I questioned it when I thought of doing it. In fact,
told
Scott
me,
and I
it
had a
makes work.
conversation where we're like, is this something we should do? So I can look into it and find out whether or not it really is an allowable thing or not.
Yeah, I've been looking at the Mass Municipal Association site, and it seems like it's always best to funnel things through a staff member if ever possible. You can find more information out, but I just wanted to share that with you so that it doesn't haunt anyone in any way. And I know it makes working difficult.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say before you adjourned tonight, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. Because I was, looking into it and considering whether I share it and have them not basically allowed to comment so that at least they see where we're at.
Right.
This is where we're at. And at each meeting, everybody has to unfortunately verbally bring up their comments like Jan's been doing tonight. And we just go through the document together.
Well,
And that is probably what we'll stick back to.
Distribute it first to a staff member, and they might have the ability to distribute.
Can I
the
ask a question while we're on that? I'm new to this clearly, but does Miriam was on the commission but resigned? So like, how is it that she is participating in this meeting? I'm unclear.
Well, she really was the primary author for these regulations. So I feel like tonight it's actually been helpful to have her be able to kind of give some knowledge and guidance behind some of these statements that we're asking questions about.
Was everybody else on the commission at the same time? Or I know Jan, maybe not, obviously not Jan, but was anybody else on the commission at the same time that these regs
We
were
were on the commission, but she was definitely the primary author for it. So it's, and also she's a member of the public, so she can actually be at these meetings and make comments if she wants to.
I do have to go, but I do think I appreciate your comment, Tom, too. I think the way that I've looked at this is as long as we're not incorporating changes and we're still talking about them here in an open meeting, we can make suggestions our own notes, but we still have to talk about them in open meeting before we could ever suggest the changes to be made in the bylaws. So if there's a better way of doing it, I'm open to that too. But I'll just say it's super handy for me to see the latest version of what we're talking about for version control.
Yeah, I know. I'll look into it and see if we're allowed to do it and to what extent we're allowed to do it. I think it's fine that we are sharing the document. It's whether or not people can privately be commenting and then other people responding to their comments. And, we need a little bit of control on that whole thing. So I'll find out. But Bob, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, DEP Circuit Rider is giving a meeting, office meeting hours, this Monday, I think around noon, and I'll send all the commissioners, new and old, a link to that, okay?
Sure. Is that Mark Stinson?
No, actually, it's the Alicia Galen, who is the one on the east. So she's not our particular Shutesbury one, but she's proven very valuable in the past as a source of information on the Wetlands Protection Act.
What is she doing, Bob?
Yeah, what's the topic, I guess?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and send you the agenda, which will have all the different topics on it. And it's something you can, if you have the time, I think you'll find it worthwhile. Again, it's in the middle of the day, so maybe not convenient for everybody. But she does answer questions, and she's been a great resource to me, at least to me in the past.
Okay, thank you. Miriam, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I wasn't editing as you went with the draft that I had, and I'd like to be able to keep up with the changes. Could I possibly get a copy of the Google Doc as it stands right now?
I don't know if we want to share it with the public at this point, because it really is the commission working on it. Once we have more of a final draft, it'll obviously get put up on the webpage, and then we're gonna have a public hearing, and the public will have plenty of time to comment on it. But right now, it's really just a working draft for the commission. All right, I will take a motion to adjourn. Welcome, Mayor. Let's just all welcome Mayor. Thanks for coming tonight, and welcome to the commission. And I did ask Mateo to put together a binder for you of Wetlands Protection Act, and I don't know if you've got that already.
No.
Okay,
I
well,
did
anyway.
I did stop in and talk to him this morning when I got sworn in.
Okay. Great.
I so
right.
move.
All right, second?
I second.
Okay, Douglas,
Hi.
Khan,
Aye.
Fox,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
and Wilson, aye. All right, good night, everybody. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next week. And we do have a site visit tomorrow if anybody can come, 3:45 at Sirius on Baker Road.
Happy New Year.
Thank you all. Take care.
Go Notre Dame.